It's one of the most strategically important waterways on the planet, a narrow stretch of sea that sees a third of all seaborne oil trade pass through its waters. Every single day, the Strait of Hormuz has long been a flashpoint for global tension, with powers vying for control and security in a region where even a minor incident can send shockwaves through energy markets around the world. Now, the United States has just made a move that could reshape the calculus. In this crucial corridor, Washington has paused its high-profile military operation, dubbed Project Freedom, a mission launched to escort and safeguard commercial shipping in the strait. The reason? A sudden turn toward possible diplomacy with Iran. As both sides jockey for advantage, the world watches. A fragile balance between confrontation and negotiation hangs in the balance, with the stakes measured in billions of dollars and barrels of oil. This decision to suspend Project Freedom didn't come out of nowhere. Tensions have been running high in the Strait of Hormuz for months, triggered by a series of violent incidents and mounting congestion in the shipping lanes. The U.S. initially responded with a show of force: warships, aircraft, and military escorts for merchant vessels. The logic was simple: protect the free flow of trade, deter attacks, and reassure jittery markets. But behind the scenes, the costs and risks of an open-ended military presence were mounting. Now, as President Trump signals a willingness to pursue a diplomatic agreement with Iran, the U.S. is recalibrating. The operation is on hold, at least for now, in a bid to create space for negotiation and perhaps de-escalation. It's a significant moment not just for the U.S. and Iran, but for the entire global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is more than a geopolitical hotspot. It's a vital artery for world trade, especially energy. Blockages or disruptions don't just affect local players, they ripple through global supply chains, impact prices at the pump, and challenge the efficiency of markets everywhere. That's why every ship that passes through its waters is more than just cargo. It's a symbol of the interconnectedness and vulnerability of modern commerce. To understand how we got here, it's worth taking a step back. The Strait of Hormuz has been a theater of brinkmanship for decades. Its narrowest point is just 21 miles. Across, barely wide enough for two supertankers to pass safely. On one side lies Iran, on the other, the United Arab Emirates and Oman. For years, the strait has been both a lifeline and a lever, a tool used by regional actors to exert pressure and by global powers to demonstrate resolve. Historically, it's been a place where economic logic collides with geopolitical ambition. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, the so-called tanker war saw both sides attack oil shipments, prompting U.S. intervention to protect the flow of crude. Since then, every flare-up, whether over sanctions, nuclear negotiations, or regional rivalries, has threatened to disrupt this critical channel. Each time, the underlying driver has been the same: the immense economic value locked up in those daily flows of oil and gas. In recent months, these familiar dynamics have reasserted themselves. Reports of attacks on commercial vessels, drone incidents, and dangerous near misses have raised the specter of escalation. The strait has grown more crowded, with military and civilian ships navigating a tense and unpredictable environment. For global markets, the risks are clear. Any sustained disruption could send oil prices soaring, strain supply chains, and trigger a scramble for alternative routes, most of which are far less efficient. The U.S. response, Project Freedom, was in many ways a textbook example of applying military power to protect market efficiency. By escorting ships and projecting force, Washington aimed to deter attacks and reassure shippers. The message was unambiguous: the free flow of commerce would be protected, whatever the... For a time, this approach seemed to stabilize the situation, at least superficially. But the underlying tensions remained unresolved. The presence of warships, while reassuring to some, risked provoking further incidents. The longer the standoff dragged on, the greater the chances of miscalculation or unintended escalation. Now the game has changed. With the suspension of Project Freedom, the U.S. is signaling a shift from military posturing to diplomatic engagement. President Trump's willingness to explore a deal with Iran is a clear recognition of the limits of force in achieving long-term stability. It's also a nod to economic realities. Sustaining a large-scale military mission in such a contested environment is costly, both in financial terms and in opportunity costs. Every dollar spent on patrols is a dollar not invested elsewhere. And every day of heightened tension in the strait is a day of risk for global markets. At the same time, Iran has announced its own initiative, a new system for managing maritime traffic in the Strait of. You're watching Today in Context, where we go beyond the headlines to explain the forces shaping the world around us. If this kind of analysis helps you make sense of the bigger picture, like the video and subscribe for more. Hormuz. The details remain sparse, but the message is unmistakable. Tehran wants to demonstrate its capacity to ensure order and perhaps to assert its own influence over the flow of commerce. For Iran, control over the strait is a crucial bargaining chip. It's both a source of revenue and leverage in negotiations with the outside world. By offering to manage shipping traffic, Iran is positioning itself as a responsible stakeholder, even as it seeks to extract concessions. For both sides, the incentives are clear. The U.S. wants to minimize the risk of war and maintain the free flow of trade. Iran seeks to ease sanctions and regain access to global markets. Underneath the rhetoric, economic incentives are driving the calculus. Neither side benefits from a prolonged crisis that chokes off trade or drives up prices. The stakes are simply too high. The longer the strait remains unstable, the greater the costs for everyone, from oil producers in the Gulf to refiners in Asia to consumers at gas stations around the globe. Yet the situation remains fragile. The ceasefire in the Gulf is tenuous, and both sides are under intense pressure. For Washington, domestic politics loom large. The administration wants to avoid the appearance of weakness, even as it courts a diplomatic breakthrough. For Tehran, internal factions compete for influence, and the leadership must balance hardline rhetoric with the economic need to re-engage with the world. The slightest misstep could unravel the current, pause and plunge the region back into crisis. The risks are not just military, they're economic and systemic. If negotiations fail and the strait becomes a battleground, the consequences would be severe. Oil prices could spike, global shipping could be rerouted at significant expense, and the efficiency of energy markets would suffer. Insurance costs for shippers would soar. The world's reliance on a single narrow choke point would be laid bare. In the worst-case scenario, a conflict could disrupt not just regional stability, but the very foundations of global trade. The lesson of past crises is clear. Bottlenecks in critical supply chains can have outsized impacts. Markets crave stability and predictability. When those are threatened, the effects ripple far beyond the point of crisis. On the other hand, a successful negotiation could set a powerful precedent. If the U.S. and Iran can de-escalate without resorting to force, it would demonstrate the value of economic incentives and diplomatic engagement in managing high-stakes choke points. It could serve as a model for crisis management in other regions like the South China Sea or the Bab el-Mandeb, where trade flows are similarly vital and similarly vulnerable. The message would be clear. When the interests of global commerce are at stake, dialogue and pragmatism can trump brinkmanship. Of course, neither outcome is guaranteed. The current pause is just that, a pause. The underlying issues remain unresolved. The incentives for both confrontation and cooperation are still in play. Markets are watching closely, pricing in both the risks and the potential rewards. For now, the decision to suspend Project Freedom reflects a clear calculation that the costs of continued escalation outweigh the benefits, at least in the short term. It's a bet on diplomacy, backed by the hard realities of economics. In the coming weeks, the world will be watching for signs of progress or relapse. Will negotiations gain traction, or will old patterns reassert themselves? Will Iran's new maritime management system bring order, or simply introduce new complexities? Will the U.S. find a sustainable balance between deterrence and engagement? These questions matter, not just for policymakers, but for everyone whose fortunes are tied to the ebb and flow of global trade. Ultimately, what happens in the Strait of Hormuz is about more than ships and soldiers. It's about the efficiency and resilience of the world economy. It's about the ability of states to manage crises without resorting to force. And it's about the recognition that in an interconnected world, the pursuit of market efficiency and stability is often the most compelling incentive of all. As the U.S. pauses its operation and opens the door to negotiation, the next chapter in this long-running drama is about to be written. The choices made now will echo far beyond the waters of the Gulf, shaping the future of crisis management, global trade, and the very logic that underpins international relations. For now, the world waits. The strait remains open, but the path forward is anything but clear. What is certain, however, is that the forces of economics, efficiency, and incentive will continue to drive the decisions of states, just as they always have. In the end, the fate of the Strait of Hormuz and the stability of global markets may depend less on the ships that patrol its waters than on the deals struck behind closed doors. And that is a lesson that resonates far beyond any single crisis, reminding us that in the contest between conflict and commerce, the scales are rarely tipped for long. The stories that define tomorrow are already unfolding today. Subscribe to Today in Context for clear, grounded analysis of the events shaping our world, one story at a time.